Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. My name is Amir and today I would like to talk about Iran's uprated retaliation. Recently, Israel and the US had attacked Iran again. This time, Iran did not hold back. Its retaliation consisted of both missile and drone attacks on Israel, Jordan, which is a new target, and Erbil. As we speak, Iran's internet has been fully restored, and it has completely closed down the Strait of Hormuz. Any US claims to the contrary are untrue. At this time, Hezbollah is also attacking IDF units in Lebanon and northern Israel too. President Donald John has resumed his slanders and armed provocations against Iran, despite the warnings of an Iranian despite the warnings delivered by Pakistan of an Iranian nuclear device detonation. Currently, Saudi Arabia, as well as other Muslim countries such as Turkey and Egypt and Qatar, are seeking an MOU with Iran, and Pakistan continues to help out. Only the US is against this, as it covertly sabotages all these attempts, and all of this makes the situation even more dangerous than it has to be. If the situation continues to deteriorate, then we could see the detonation of a nuclear device in Iranian soil for the sake of Iranian autonomy, as was stated by President Masoud Pezeshkian. Also, Ansarullah has closed the Bab al-Mandab to any ships linked to Israel. Now, Iran does have a MOU with the US, but it has not been released, and it will be signed on this week's Friday in Geneva, but it will be hosted by Pakistan. I also want to go over the current, or rather the recently held St. Petersburg International Economic Forum and matters pertaining to Russia, because this current SPIEF conference was rather notable. In it, President Vladimir Putin noted that the race for national autonomy globally is on, and that or what he called sovereignty. This autonomy requires efficiency, and it also means that a country must possess competent, knowledgeable, and technically sophisticated populations, which also must be highly paid, and these people must be allowed to utilize their wealth to invest directly in their towns and cities. As we can see already, Russia, China, and many other countries and many global south countries are developing. Their populations are getting wealthier as they advance both educationally and technologically, and as they continue to trade both within themselves and between themselves, increasingly in currency swaps, as well as other methodologies such as cryptocurrencies. We could also see a possible BRICS mechanism that will also provide a route through which trade can continue without the fear of any US sanctions. Additionally, private initiatives that carve out new market niches are the signs of an increasingly dynamic and autonomous economy. Now, that is an important sign of an economy's development. As we have seen in the 21st century, it is not merely the capitalist nor communist societies that advance that have advanced, but a combination of both. And China is the best case, and China is the best example. It has a centrally planned economy, but only at the top. The Chinese citizen has ample opportunity and has ample opportunity to conduct their own businesses. They have access to banks, which are controlled by the state, but they are allowed private property. They can do business both within and outside of China, and increasingly they are accruing wealth, actual wealth that is not the result of inflation or keeping up with any sort of inflation, but real wages. And these wages have been used to improve their own lives and through taxation the lives of the entire nation. Additionally, Russia's digital ecosystem continues to grow, and it also hopes to be among the top 10 in terms of total national merchant fleet deadweight tonnage. Now, deadweight tonnage is the amount of weight an individual ship can carry. And if Russia does achieve this statistic, then it would be an important maritime power when it comes to trade in the Arctic region. Currently, the Arctic possesses untapped hydrocarbons as well as other wealth, and Russia is looking to exploit that wealth. It has already invested, along with China, in its Arctic Sea route, which can outflank the Suez Canal and deliver goods from China to Europe at a fraction of the time and cost. This will be facilitated through Russia's new icebreaker fleet, which is currently growing. No other country has such a massive icebreaker fleet, and it will continue to grow. It also means that other countries could utilize this trade route to send goods from Asia to Europe. During his speech, President Vladimir Putin also stated that the SMO and the current conflict between Iran and the US and Israel, which I have dubbed the second imposed war, are merged. The EU is seeking out war with Russia, and there are serious calls within Moscow itself to attack Kiev and President Vladimir Zelensky directly. Recently, a Ukrainian drone attacked an oil facility in the Republic of Dagestan to Russia's south. The likely source was Azerbaijan. As we can see, the attacks are becoming more and more desperate. There are links between the SMO and attacks on Iran as well. Or rather, there would have been if Iran had not attacked a warehouse that had stationed Ukrainian personnel and drones. That, however, is not the only sign. There are Ukrainian forces that have been operating alongside the Tuareg militants in northern Mali, and they have been training and utilizing They have been training the Tuaregs against the Mali government and Russia's Afrikansky Korps. However, they have been unsuccessful. Ukraine, under US orders, is spreading the conflict through any means necessary. It has already deployed forces to Mali and tried to get involved in Iran. Excuse me. But these attempts have faltered. What's more important is that Konstantinovka, the third largest city if liberated, is about to fall. And yet, US and European mainstream media are not talking about this. Nor are they talking about the threat the Russian military is posing to the city of Zaporozhye. Another important fact is that there has been no actual rise in the drone attacks in Russia as compared to 2025. The only change is that these drones are being sent deeper into Russia. This means that they carry more fuel and less explosives. And attacks on refineries are repairable within hours. These attacks also do not influence Russian production or exports. As we can see, Ukraine has failed in its part to drain away Russian resources. Instead, Russia has only been strengthened. Its economy is far stronger than the West had anticipated, going even to the possibility of US sanctions being lifted. We will come to that pretty soon. But before that, I would like to talk about something in more detail that I've already spoken of, the DPRK's economic development. Recently, I am certain some of you might have seen a Wall Street Journal that talked about the DPRK as an economic success. Caleb Maupin explained that this article is closer to a diplomatic favor as it is connected to President Xi Jinping's visit to the DPRK. The article was actually published on the day President Xi landed there. It is also connected to a $1 billion contract signed at SPIEF that starts the design and building process for the Peace Tunnel over the Bering Straits. Kirill Dmitriev, the Russian businessman who is in contact frequently with Jared Kushner and Stephen Witkoff, signed that contract. Additionally, a 12-person delegation from the White House was at SPIEF. I also believe that the words of Congresswoman Anna Paulina of Florida, who stated that the US and Russia have agreed to a peace deal concerning Ukraine, they are merely waiting on Ukraine to reciprocate, are important. It shows that Russia is starting to see the US slowly and with great reluctance seek out Russia as an economic partner. This is not just an economic deal, however. But we will get to that shortly. I still want to go over the DPRK. Now, investor Jim Rogers Jr., who is a really good source that I have studied for years, and Caleb Maupin agrees with his assessment that most North Koreans know at least one foreign language, and its mountains are full of minerals needed for computing. Even better, the DPRK has its own chip and cell phone industry. Additionally, all of its neighbors, the ROK, South Korea, China, and Russia, are regional economic powerhouses. All of these factors force the US to pivot closer to Asia at the expense of the EU. And, and Caleb even believes that the reason President Donald John went to the DPRK in his first term was because that the American oligarchs connected to him saw potential in the DPRK's development and they wanted their share. It is possible also that he could use the Bering Strait peace tunnel along with lifting Russian oil sanctions to flood the US market with Russian oil and thereby improve his chances in the midterm elections. I personally doubt that the tunnel could be built and be put into service before then. I also doubt that the US would lift Russian sanctions to that degree. So far, the US has not lifted sanctions considerably on any country. If they did so to Russia, it would no doubt be quite the story. No matter how silent mainstream media might pretend to be, the fact that Russian oil flows into the US would be seen across the board in terms of oil prices. And and in food prices. However, such plans might be too little too late. There might not be much affection for President Donald John even after these measures have been enacted. He might simply be too late, and his gambit, like the gambit with Iran, may be doomed to fail. Lastly, one other thing I want to talk about concerning energy is the interesting story of Cuba. Anastasia of Think Bricks stated that Cuba's energy prognosis has improved significantly following the import of Chinese solar panels and batteries in 2025. The transaction was financed with Cuban nickel. Solar power used to make up 5.8% of Cuba's energy share. Now it is over 20%, generating 1 gigawatts worth of energy. And it is planned to reach 2 gigawatts by the end of 2028. Earlier, those of us who were following the situation noted severe blackouts, noted severe cuts to hospital services because they simply had no power. That situation has been reversed. And yes, whilst this is a good development, it still means that Cuba needs more time to actually reach that 2 gigawatt and possibly greater demand of energy. This means that Russian oil will still need to be shipped to Cuba. And as some of you might have known, it will have to be done under guard by the Russian Navy. So we will be seeing more of these convoys for the time being. But this is still a very positive development. Cuba previously tried its utmost to improve relations with the US. This was most clearly seen this was most clearly seen in the early 2010s under President Barack Hussein. But those attempts were frustrated under President Donald John's first administration. And now the Cubans have finally reciprocated. Their previous strategy was to align more closely with the US so that they could reduce the chances of further sanctions, and even better, see those sanctions released. However, that has not been the case. No matter Cuba's attitudes and maneuvers, the US remained hostile to Cuba, and those sanctions remained in force. Frequently, these sanctions are debated in the UN. Frequently, most countries state their vehement opposition, and yet the US and Israel maintain their veto on these sanctions. But this is still an important milestone, as Cuba, along with other global South countries, could hope to create their own grids and microgrids using cheap yet effective Chinese solar panel and battery technology, some of the best in the world, that is accessible to the global South without fear of US sanctions. Lastly, there is an intriguing piece of information. Intriguing information relating to the recent US-Israel row. Some of you might have seen how Axios, which is a media outlet connected to Israeli intelligence, stated that President Donald John and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were involved in a shouting match between each other. And yet, Alexander Mercouris explained that in 2025, during Operation Rising Lion, there were identical reports of a row between the two leaders. Later on, it turned out that story was a psyop, as President Donald admitted at the time. So there are serious grounds for skepticism. And it is certainly odd that such a row would ever be publicized at all, and by Axios, no less. Once again, this incident shows us the importance of remembering that one cannot simply take things at face value, and that one should remember the past. After all, Operation Rising Lion is quite similar, if not identical, to the current second imposed war. The situation, the players, the maneuvers were also identical. Iran maintained its willingness to cooperate with the US time and time again, and Israel remained belligerent, and the US equally so. Therefore, such rows, no matter who reports on them, will always be contested as they were the first time, a psyop, simply a made-up situation that is to satisfy the domestic populations of both the US and Israel. Nobody in Iran after seeing such a row reported twice would think it genuine. as I am certain no one in the global south would either. As it stands, Israel remains a pariah. It is the only country that has involved itself almost entirely in the Palestinian Holocaust. And yet, the US has remained its staunchest, if not sole ally in the whole affair. Yes, the EU and the UK play their own roles, but those are nothing compared to the US in terms of military and political support. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that my information proves useful in your own analyses. I look forward to your comments. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.